Hello, everyone. Hello on the internet and hello in real life, this huge crowd. I'm here tonight to talk about ethical social media alternatives. Ironically, I'm doing this through Instagram Live, but maybe by the end of the presentation, you'll see why that's not necessarily a good thing. We'll see. So the title of my presentation is Ethical Social Media Alternatives, or We All Know That Facebook Sucks. So the slides for this presentation are in my bio on Instagram. So it's at dumpsterqueer. If you go to my bio, you'll find the slides there. So you can follow along at home if the slides aren't visible in the live feed or in the recorded feed. There's so many feeds. Okay, so you might be wondering, who the fuck am I? My name is Tobi. A lot of you probably know me already, but for those who don't, my pronouns are they, them. I used to be an academic. So at the Ghent, I did a PhD in English literature quite a while ago. And then after that, I got into programming. So now I work as a software engineer, and I focus mostly on back-end server and cloud stuff. And also in my free time, I spend a lot of time reading about cybersecurity. So if you need to reach me for some reason, you can email me. You can also reach me on Instagram for now, until I get rid of my Instagram, which I will eventually do. And I'm also on Mastodon, and you will know what this means by the end of the presentation. Or maybe you do already, but you will know more about it probably by the end of the presentation. So the agenda for this talk is, first, I want to talk about surveillance capitalism. I will explain that in some detail. Then I want to talk about corporate social media and what the corporate social media business model is. And then I want to finish the presentation by talking about alternative social media. And I think I'll be talking for something like 15 to 20 minutes. And then I'll take questions at the end. So number 4 is questions. If there are any, we'll see. Okay, so first up, surveillance capitalism. What is surveillance capitalism? It's a term coined by an academic called Shoshana Zuboff in 2014. You can see her here. I put a link on the slide to a YouTube video where she explains on Channel 4 News what surveillance capitalism is, but I'm going to summarize it in these slides. So she mentions... Is it broken?
No, I don't think it is.
Okay. Are you sure?
It's still rolling.
Okay, fine.
Fine.
Yeah, okay, fine. So Shoshana Zuboff, she begins this interview by saying, here's how surveillance capitalism works. It begins with these big tech companies unilaterally claiming our private human experience as their free source of raw material. So you probably already have some idea what she's talking about, but I have more quotations to explain it. So to summarize from the same interview, she talks about computational products that analyze our interactions and predict our future behavior in order to sell predictions and profiles to business customers. So I'm going to give you a more concrete example, but basically what she's talking about is mass data gathering and surveillance of people using the internet, which is not something that happens on behalf of like government bodies necessarily, but on behalf of big tech corporations like Facebook, Instagram, Google, Twitter, etc. So it's essentially a new way of making money through mass surveillance of customers and selling customer data. There's another quotation here that goes into a bit more detail. So there's a link to this article, which isn't by Shoshana. I forgot her second name. Not from Shoshana Zuboff, but from someone who's summarizing her ideas. So the quotation reads, surveillance capitalism describes a market-driven process where the commodity for sale is your personal data, and the capture and production of this data relies on mass surveillance of the internet. This activity is often carried out by companies that provide us with free online services, such as search engines and social media platforms. So I'm going to give you a more concrete example of this in action, step by step. So let's say you are on the internet, on your laptop or on your phone, you're on Facebook and you're scrolling through your feed and you see someone post about a pair of new shoes. They're really happy with these shoes and they want to talk about them, so they post a picture of them. And you engage with the post in some way by reacting to it, either with a comment or a like, or you share it or whatever. The next step, you go on Google and you search for vegan leather shoes because you're excited by these shoes and you want to find some shoes of your own. You're looking around for various links and stuff like that, reading articles about vegan leather shoes. And you end up on, for example, I just picked this basically random example from Googling. You end up on the PETA Vegan Shoe Shopping Guide website. So you read through that, you look up another couple of links, you read reviews of shoes, that kind of thing. And then finally you decide you're going to buy some shoes. So you go on Amazon and you buy this cool pair of shoes. So I'm going to go through step by step here what's happening and what these companies are seeing of your data and how they're following you around the internet and making money off the way that you use the internet. So in step 1, so that's where you react on a friend's post about new shoes on Facebook. At this point, Facebook has already determined what the content of the original post is using machine learning algorithms. So they know that it's a post about shoes. They know who posted it. They know which friends this person has. They can tell how you are engaging with the post. So in other words, how long you're looking at the post, what kind of reaction you make to the post. They examine things like the language that you use in the comments on the post. So if you say nice pair of shoes full stop, they will read that differently from if you say nice pair of shoes exclamation mark. And they take all of that information about how you reacted and they add that to their profile about you, which they then use for like further refining their algorithms and for advertising purposes. So step number 2, you're Googling vegan leather shoes. So through this Google search, Google is recording your search, adding it to their own metrics. If you're logged into Google, when you make the search, they tie it to your profile. So they know that, like, yeah, whatever at gmail.com is interested in vegan shoes. They record the IP address that you made the thing from, so they know where you are. They also record something called an advertising ID, which if you use an Android phone is a unique ID tied to your phone that Google uses for monitoring what you do on your phone, not just through google.com, but through other apps as well. And then Google, of course, also adds that data to their stockpile for future advertising purposes. Step 3, you end up on the PETA Vegan Shoe Shopping Guide. I'm just going to open this website in the browser and show you what it looks like. It looks pretty normal website. It has like tips for what you should look for when you're buying a pair of shoes. What you should buy, what you shouldn't buy, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at what it's actually gathering about you, I'm just going to show here. So you can see when you visit this website, it's I have tracker blockers installed in my browser, so it's blocking a bunch of trackers, but basically it tells Twitter that you're on this website. So if you're logged into Twitter, Twitter now knows that you're on this PETA Vegan Shoes website. It also tries to load trackers from Facebook, and it has some advertising trackers and some fingerprinters, which basically can tie your identity to this website visit. So already by visiting this website through your Google searches, you're adding a lot of information to your profiles about where you are on the internet and what you're doing. Google Analytics can also tell how long you're spending on the website, which links you're clicking on, and how long you're looking at certain content. And whether you click through from that website to any other links that also use Google Analytics. So they can really follow you step by step through your web searches. Finally, you buy the cool shoes from Amazon. So say you Google vegan shoes, where to buy, something like that. Then you yeah, sometimes you see Amazon links directly in those Google search results. So say you click on one of those links, Google now knows that you're basically committed to the purchase because you've ended up on Amazon. And when you're actually on Amazon, it will measure your engagement with different kinds of shoes. It will see if you put them in your cart, if you take them out of your cart, how long you look at each picture of a shoe for instance, and then they can feed all of that data back into the profile that they have about you. So just from these 4 steps and this very simple, like everyday transaction that lots of people probably do, like all the time. I've also done this, of course. 4 big tech players at least know that you're vegan or interested in veganism. They can then use this information to target you with advertising for products that they think you might be interested in. They can use it to refine which products or posts or pages they show you. So you might find that if you go back to Facebook, you're going to be seeing more information about vegan groups. The next time you Google something, they might be more likely to shuffle vegan content to the top of the list, or related things. You're more likely to have friends and groups suggested to you that are also vegan. And they can also take this data to correlate with other data that they've already gathered about you in order to make assumptions about your personality and your politics. So they might say like, oh, a lot of queers are vegan, maybe this person is not straight. Or like, oh, a lot of left-wing people are vegan, maybe this person is left-wing. And then they can experiment with your engagement to confirm or deny these assumptions. So they could, for example, show you like a left-wing political post and see if you engage with that. And if you do, then they know like, okay, we were right. This person is probably also left-wing. So then they can add that to their profile. As an extra spicy bonus, your internet service provider will also know which websites you visited and in what order. They can't see the content of the websites that you visited, but they know where you've been. So they can already make quite a lot of inferences based on that. So your internet service providers can also sell advertising based on what they know about you and your preferences. And even if you buy the shoes IRL, so say you find a store that has the shoes, if you have an Android phone in your pocket, Google, for example, will already know how you got to the store, how long it took you to get there, how long you stayed in the store, and if you leave a review online, what you thought about your experiences in the store. So there's this constant surveillance going on in order to refine advertising algorithms and sell you as a customer to other companies and corporations, basically. Are there any questions on this before I go on surveillance capitalism? Okay, anything online? No? Okay, then I'll move on. So having established that this kind of surveillance is happening basically at all times, I want to talk about corporate social media and their business model and how they also surveil their users. So back in the day, I'm pretty old, so I remember things like MySpace and when Facebook first became a thing. And a lot of the promises of social media in the first place were actually quite utopian, nice promises, which is one reason why social media became so popular. So what we essentially think social media should be is, these things. There's probably more, but I just took these from my own experiences. So a way to keep in touch with friends and family and make new friends. We want to use social media to express our thoughts and feelings. We want to use it to learn and grow through shared resources and discussions, and we want to see memes. That's the ideal, right? That's what we want from our social media experiences, I think. What we actually end up with now in 2020, so what social media has actually become now is basically a very, very sophisticated data harvesting operation. So all of your data is being collected all the time from the way that you use social media. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram are constantly watching how you're using their platform, what you're looking at for how long, whether you're liking it, who else is liking it, in order to suggest friends to you and keep you engaged with the platform as much as possible. And your attention, fundamentally, is being sold to advertisers. So Facebook's goal is to keep you engaged with their platform so that they can get your eyes on adverts. 97% of Facebook's revenue comes from advertising, apparently. So they are essentially an advertising company, not really a social media company anymore. It's also, in a way, become a walled garden. So social media isn't necessarily something that you just visit once during your day anymore, but it's something that you spend a lot of your online time in. And Facebook has a vested interest in making itself as much of the internet as you ever need to see. It's in Facebook's interests to provide everything that you need within Facebook so that you don't need to ever leave Facebook. Same goes with Instagram and Twitter and all of these other social media platforms. And basically, these companies have become absolutely unmanageably big. So they're incredibly rich, they're very powerful, and they're very dangerous. That's what we end up with after all of our idealistic dreaming about what social media should be. So to summarize their business model in 5 points, the first thing Facebook and Instagram did was to offer a very sophisticated and easy to use free service. They keep you locked into the platform and keep you engaged on the platform. They convince you to give up as much of your personal data as possible. So for instance, like Facebook, when you first sign up, it asks for your birthday. It asks for things like your university, where you went to primary school, who your family members are, etc. All of this very personal information. You just give that over to Facebook because they convince you that they can be trusted with it somehow, even though we know that they're misusing that data. Any data that they can't convince users to give up voluntarily, they gain through surveillance. So the kind of surveillance capitalism that I talked about in the first part of the presentation. They follow you around the internet. They scrape as much of the internet as they possibly can to know what is on there. And they refine their algorithms to provide that content themselves. And then they make all of their money by selling targeted advertising to third parties. So they know, like, okay, this person is a vegan leftist. They're going to be more responsive to these like vegan leftist political posts or like LGBT content or whatever. So we're going to sell advertising space to these advertisers to target this specific person. That's basically the business model. So I have a bit of an analogy for the experience of having a conversation on social media. So it's a little bit like you are having a nice night in the bar with your friends. You're chilling, you're talking, whatever's on your mind, you're just talking about it, you're having jokes, fine. But the whole time you're having this conversation, you're being watched by someone who is taking notes on how you interact. They're watching exactly what you're doing, how long you look at each other, what kind of things you say to each other, whether you laugh, whether you cry, if you're interested, if you're not interested. They're watching everything, and they're taking notes about it. And then this person who you don't even know, who just turned up in the middle of your group of friends, starts interjecting and guiding the conversation. So they've listened long enough now that they know, like, I think I can convince these people to talk about this particular subject for a while. So let's try and make that happen. So they guide the conversation according to whoever is paying them. Pretty sinister if you think about it this way. But it's, something that we all kind of put up with on a daily basis when we're having our conversations on social media. The person who is, this weird, creepy fucking person is also deciding what can and can't be said. So if they hear something that they think breaks some kind of code of decency, they will prevent it from being said. They also essentially decide at what volume your friends are talking or at what volume you can hear them. So Facebook, of course, tends to shuffle more provocative posts to the top of the feed. So it's the equivalent of having your friend with the most problematic opinions also speak in the loudest voice, because everyone is then listening really closely to this person and either engaging angrily or in agreement or whatever. So they're essentially curating your conversation with your friends according to, in order to make money, in order to make as much money as possible. There are some side effects to this, aside from the fact that it's like clearly creepy as fuck. We've all by now, I think, heard quite a lot about the bubble effect and social media bubbles, which means that Facebook tends to promote engagement with people who already think like us. So we end up only seeing people that agree with us already, or people that Facebook thinks will agree with us. Same for Instagram, of course, since it's owned by Facebook. They do exactly the same thing. There's also the phenomenon of social cooling. I put a link here to a website that explains what this is. But basically it means that when you are being watched all the time by a third party that you don't know, so a government or in this case, social media moderators, you tend to not speak as freely as you would if you know that you weren't being heard. So our conversations that we have with people on social media aren't as intimate anymore as they used to be because we're worried about being censored. So when you make a post on Instagram, you censor yourself. Maybe you don't want to make people sad by talking about something bad that happened to you, or you curate your own kind of brand image of yourself and you chop off all of the unpleasant, jaggedy edges that you don't want people to see. And you end up basically presenting an image of yourself that isn't actually the truth. And this is exacerbated by the kind of algorithms that are used on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, etc. So any questions about corporate social media before I move on? No? Okay. I know it's super depressing, but I'm going to present some nice alternatives now. So that was the really shitty, unpleasant part of the talk, and this is going to be the nice, happier part of the talk. So, so what are our alternatives? Given that we know at this point how our data is being used against us, essentially, and how it's being sold on these enormous capitalist platforms that are making billionaires like Zuckerberg, what can we do about it? Or how can we get off Facebook? Or what else is there, actually? What is out there? I did some research, and I did some research with this in mind, this simple goal. So basically what we want is to take the good stuff, so interacting with your friends, having memes, that kind of thing. We want to take that good stuff with as little of the bad stuff as possible. And I came up with this list of what an ideal platform should be able to provide. So it should be free first, because no one ever wants to pay for anything on the internet. And if it's not free, no one's going to use it. So that's a really important one. Should be easy to use and have lots of features. So we are very used to using platforms like Instagram and Facebook, where they're very easy to use, first of all. Like even your grandma can use Facebook. And we have lots of features on there, like groups and lists and stories and all that kind of thing. So we should be able to find something with similar features. We want it to be private, so we don't want just anyone to see our data. We want it to be secure, so we want to know that our data is safe from hackers and other third parties. We want to know it's not being sold, for instance. And we want safety features, so we want to be able to block people that we don't want to interact with. We want moderation, so that problematic posts can be flagged, etc. Very importantly as well, we don't want any advertising, because adverts are just annoying. We don't want surveillance, so we don't want to be followed. We don't want trackers. We don't want this ideal social media platform to know that we've visited certain websites. We don't want any algorithms dictating what we see on the platform, and no user profiling. So we don't want our personal information being sold to advertisers. We want something durable, so we want something that's not just going to disappear into thin air. When you use one of these big social media platforms, you assume that it's going to be around forever. Like, we all know Facebook isn't going to disappear in the next 10 or probably even 20 years. So we feel comfortable kind of building a bit of a life on this platform. So we want something that we also know is not just going to disappear, because it sucks when you start building an identity, like on Tumblr, for instance, and then they stop allowing you to post boobs. And then you have to leave Tumblr. I might be talking from personal experience. And we also want something ethical, so something that doesn't make billionaires. So a non-capitalist form of social media that isn't corporate in nature. So the question is, does anything actually meet these criteria? So I looked up a lot of options. None of these are the ones I actually chose, but I put links to all of them here so you can investigate them as you wish. So there's MeWe, which is like a Facebook kind of thing that doesn't track your data, but it also uses Amazon as a server backend. So it's definitely doesn't fit the model of not being corporate. There's Elo, which is a photo sharing thing, a little bit like Instagram, but it doesn't allow private profiles. So that doesn't really fit our model either. There's something called Diaspora. This one, I don't know if it's even working anymore. Who knows? There's something called Vero, which is a little bit like Instagram, but it's funded by a venture capitalist billionaire. So also not really that interested in that one. PixelFed, which actually seems pretty cool. It's a lot like Instagram, but it's still in development. So that's not really an option. There's something called Pleroma, which is like federated microblogging. And yeah, I don't really have that much else to say about that one. Yeah.
That's more or less still functioning.
Ah, it is really?
It is.
Ah, okay, cool.
That's what's very interesting.
Okay. Are you Arno?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, hey. Nice to meet you. We recorded a bunch of this so you can see it.
Great.
Yeah, you're not going to miss anything. So the alternative I ended up picking is something called Mastodon. So it has a super cute logo, which is nice. There's an explainer video here for what it is. I'm not going to play the video now because you can just watch it in your own time. So the key points for Mastodon. Well, firstly, it pretty much meets all of the criteria that I mentioned here. So it is free. It is pretty easy to use. It is full-featured. It has all of these security and safety features that we want. It doesn't use advertising. It has no surveillance on it, no trackers, algorithms, user profiling. The durability I'll come back to because it is a durable platform. And it's also an ethical platform in the sense that it's not a capitalist platform in any way. So the key points for Mastodon are it is kind of like Twitter. If you've ever used Twitter before, you'll be instantly familiar with the way Mastodon works. If you haven't used Twitter before, it could take a bit of getting used to. It's a non-profit organization and it's funded by donations. So it was built by someone in 2016. And since then, it's been under active development and it's funded completely by donations and lots of contributions from other programmers who also work on the code. That is to say, it's open source, which means that the code for Mastodon, anyone can go and look at the code and see how it works. Anyone can change the code if they want to, or copy the code or whatever. It's completely open source. It's also under active development, so it's still being worked on. A new version was released, I think, last month or so, or the month before. As I mentioned, it's free. There's no advertising, no tracking. The news feed that you see is chronological. So the latest post appears at the top, like Facebook used to be before they started using algorithms to determine what you see. It's easy to use. It looks nice. And it's decentralized and uses federation. I'm going to explain what this means because it's a little complicated. But first, I'm actually just going to show you what it looks like. So this is what it actually looks like. So yeah, if you've seen Twitter before, this will look pretty familiar. So you have a timeline, you have your different types of feeds, you see the content here from people that you follow. You can write your statuses and posts here, attach media, all that kind of thing. So it really looks like a professional social media platform. But to come back to decentralization and federation. So what decentralization means is that the network doesn't consist of just one like monolithic entity. Like when you go to Facebook, for example, you're visiting the Facebook servers. So you see just like basically this server farm of servers that are just running Facebook and compiling all of your data in one place. Mastodon, on the other hand, it consists of multiple instances. So these are like kind of mini, how do I put this? They're like smaller spaces within this larger ecosystem. And each instance has its own rules and social norms. So you could have an instance for like general conversation, an instance for like LGBT stuff specifically, instances for like car enthusiasts, whatever. Like you can make an instance based on any kind of interest, or you can make it as general as you want. Instances can be any size, so you can have just one person on an instance, or you can go up to thousands and thousands. They are community moderated, so each instance has moderators from within that instance who moderate the content. A little bit like, yeah, if you ever used a forum back in the day, the people who moderated forums are also just people who use the forums. And they, yeah, establish the norms of moderation amongst themselves. But it's not a walled garden, because users can still talk to users from other instances thanks to the federation model. So to explain this a little bit, say you are on this instance here on the left, instance A, and all of your friends and stuff from your local area are also on instance A, and you want to follow someone from over here on instance B, that's no problem. You can just follow them like you would on Twitter. Yeah, they can also follow you back, and then that means that you're kind of federated with each other. So you're joined in some way if you have users following each other. And then sometimes you can also see information from like posts from the public feeds of these other instances on your public feed and so on. You can, of course, choose not to federate with anyone. So if you want your instance to be completely isolated and just talk amongst yourselves, you can also do that. That's an option. Yeah, so what makes this model durable is that if one of these servers goes down, all of the other ones still stay up. So there's no central point of failure for this network. An instance can go missing and the users can migrate to another instance, and the network as a whole stays intact. In terms of data and privacy, this is a really important one. You can set public or private posts. You can set things to be followers only. You can have your account be open or closed. So in the same way that you have private accounts on Instagram, you can make private accounts on Mastodon. With the extra bonus that even with a private account, you can still choose to make some of your posts public. So that's also nice, because on Insta, you are either entirely public or entirely private. There's no in between, except for the close friends thing. Your private data also stays on your server instance, and it's only stored temporarily on other instances. So your password, for instance, always stays on the hardware of whoever's running the server. Your photos and stuff like that are also just on that server hardware. And they are only stored on other instances for as long as people are accessing your content from those instances. And it's up to the admins of the instance to be responsible for data security. So the people who own the servers, for example, me. Yeah, I already talked a little bit about what it looks like. Some other cool features that I wanted to mention because I find them really neat. You can filter to only see local posts. So you can just see posts from people who are on your instance, and then you don't see posts from like all over the world, if that's what you want. So say you have a friendship group in real life already, you can just see posts from your friends if you want to. There's also direct messaging, so you can slide in people's DMs, wink. And the other cool thing I like is that there's sensitive image blurring and content warnings. So you can post like boobs, butts, whatever, genitals if you want to. And it doesn't mean that everyone's going to automatically see them, because you can mark your posts as sensitive so that people have to actually click on the post in order to see what's behind it. So that's also really cool. And the content warnings means that you can have little warnings like this. So like NSFW, or say you have a really triggering thing you want to talk about, like trauma or something, or violence, you can add content warnings there. And then people can decide on a per post basis, like, yeah, I want to see this, or no, I'll just skip this post. So that's really nice. Some of the downsides of Mastodon. The Twitter-like interface can take a bit of getting used to. It took me a little while to get used to it because I wasn't really a big fan of Twitter. Now I'm kind of used to it, and it just, yeah, it makes sense already. So that's cool. Because there are no algorithms suggesting content based on your likes and dislikes, it can be a little bit hard to find people. Because it doesn't say, hey, this person is a lot like you, you should follow this person. So you have to really look for people to follow. Also, the messaging and the direct messages are not end-to-end encrypted. So if you want to have private, very sensitive conversations about, yeah, very personal things, or, yeah, some kind of activity that isn't necessarily legal, you can, you should use something else for that. So you can use Signal or something similar. So hopefully at this point you're thinking like, huh, this sounds cool, Tobi. How can I try this thing out? I made an instance myself. So it's running on a laptop, an old laptop in my living room, connected to my router. And that is, the address is here. So mastodon.undergrond.org. There's a link here as well. So if you look at the slides, you can get this link. The rules and the terms and conditions are linked as well, so you can see what the terms and conditions are for this particular instance. If you want to join, send an application. You just have to write a line about like why you want to join. It can just be like 3 words, that's fine. But there are lots of other instances too. So I don't just want to pimp my instance, but you can also join, there's a whole list of different instances with different kinds of content. So you can pick from among all of these like general instances. Some of them have quite a lot of users. There's regional instances for particular areas. Instances based on different interests. So there's photography instances. There's a lot of LGBT instances. Yeah, so I mean, feel free to browse. You don't. Yes, Sophie.
Can you only join one instance?
Yeah.
Join several.
Okay, so I'll just read out the question. So Sophie asked if you can only join one instance or if you can join several. You can join as many as you like. Each instance kind of operates like, you can have a separate login on each instance. You can't have one login on multiple instances. That's the thing. So for instance, I have a login on the Undergrond Mastodon. I also made a login on a couple of other ones just to find people. And then I followed them from my main like Mastodon one. So that's one way of doing things. You can also have multiple accounts on one instance if you use separate email addresses. So one thing I did on mine was I have like one main account where I post like political stuff and memes and selfies, and then I have another like NSFW account where I reblog stuff like I used to use Tumblr back in the day. So lots of nudes and shit. So I advise you consider joining either the instance that I set up, which you're very welcome to join. I set it up basically for the Ghent queers. So if anyone from Blond is watching on Instagram Live, basically made this to try and lure all of my queer friends over from Instagram. We got like around 50 people already on there, so that's already pretty cool. But more people are very, very welcome. Or just join another instance or make an account, see what you think of it. If you don't like it, that's also fine, of course. And that's it. That's all I prepared. So thanks for listening. Okay, I will now take questions from the floor or from online.
I have a question.
Alexi.
Would you advise people against using Instagram, or well, if people are on Instagram right now or Facebook, would you tell them to go off?
Yeah. Okay. So the question from Alexi was, would I advise people to stop using Facebook and Instagram if they use them already? Not necessarily. I think it depends what you use it for. It's very hard to get off these platforms. But I think it could be an option to move some parts of your life onto a different platform. I do think, for instance, that having like anti-capitalist conversations on a capitalist platform is kind of contradictory. So, yeah, I don't know if I would recommend doing that. Yeah, I also think if you're posting adult content, it also doesn't really make sense to be using these platforms. And yeah, given what I discussed about the evils of these platforms, in my view, I mean, I wouldn't recommend using them, but I understand that it's not easy to leave these things. I also myself still have an Instagram account, with the goal of basically moving as many people off Instagram as possible. And then once I've done that, I'm going to close my account.
But if you have like a commercial activity or a business and you rely on reaching out to people using those very popular and widespread social media platforms, it's difficult to move off them, right?
Yeah, so Alexi just said if you have a business or another kind of platform that relies on the social media, it's very hard to move off it. Yeah, I agree. For businesses and things like that, it makes sense to have a Facebook page. As much as I don't think Facebook is really a good thing, at the moment, it's kind of the lowest common denominator. So if you want people to find your business, yeah, that's the way to do it. I even mentioned in the terms and conditions for the Mastodon instance that I set up that I would not like commercial activity to be conducted on the platform, mostly because I don't want to be responsible for people's livelihoods. Yeah. Other questions? Sophie?
Tobi, can you tell us a bit about how Instagram influences your political views or actions? About that, you mentioned it shortly.
Yeah, sure. So Sophie just asked if I could expand on how Instagram influences people's political views. One of the ways it does it is by promoting content with the most radical kind of engagement. So content that people are most likely to engage with, whether in terms of outrage or in terms of like solidarity. So it tends to shuffle more popular posts up to the top of the feed so that you see them more often. So that's Instagram. Facebook also does the same thing, but also like explicitly contains political advertising as well. So I've seen, for example, adverts for political parties on Facebook. They've been a huge player in the Trump first the election campaign in 2016, then the re-election campaign now. And they tend to funnel people into more extremist views, I think. So I would argue that using these platforms that base their success on engagement tends to make your views more extreme. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Arno.
Do you expect to overcome the network effect with your attempt of starting a new community? I mean, isn't the fear that most people are just going to join, browse a little bit, and then decide, oh, there's nothing here, I'm leaving again, or I'm not using my account again. So then you have lots of ghost accounts.
Yeah, right. So Arno just asked if I'm worried about the network effect of people signing up, deciding that they aren't really that into the platform, or I guess their friends aren't on there yet, and then leaving. Yeah, I think that's always a risk with any of these platforms, of course. I think the hardest part with social media is the kind of lock-in effect. So you feel like, okay, all of my friends are on Facebook, so I can't really leave Facebook, right? Because then I don't talk to any of my friends anymore. Yeah, that is a concern, I suppose. I think one of the solutions to that is to just try and separate certain parts. So for example, say you just use Facebook to stay in touch with your family, and then maybe you use another platform for like political posts, and you have another platform for memes or something like that. I think that's one way around the network effect. I also think Mastodon is actually a pretty kick-ass platform. So I think if enough people start using it, then I'm not too worried about the network effect. Like I already found quite a lot of cool people to follow, actually. So I don't really have any question myself about removing my other social media accounts, as long as I still have ways of keeping in touch with people who aren't on Mastodon. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about it, but not super worried. I'm more curious to see how many people will actually sign up. And also this is basically an experiment anyway. So if it doesn't pan out and people decide they still prefer to use other social media, like that's totally fine. Because trying to convince everyone to delete their Facebook and Insta accounts and move their whole lives onto a different platform is like, that's a mountain that I can't really climb. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions from the floor?
Do you think there's a future for Instagram and Facebook, because we all are more and more aware of the harms that those platforms do? Do you think they will keep growing, or do you think alternatives like Mastodon will gradually become more and more important?
Yeah,
or
okay.
Maybe it's a utopian.
Let me summarize the question. So Alexei just asked if I think there's a future for Facebook and Instagram, given that we're all more aware of the problems with those platforms than before. I think there's a lot of work being done in terms of like government regulation of these platforms to prevent them from some of their more egregious acts. So I know in the US there's discussion about making platforms more responsible for what they post. Instagram and Facebook and Twitter now are adding like warnings to conspiracy theory posts and that kind of thing. So in a sense, I think regulation would help, but I don't really believe it's going to fundamentally change a lot of the bigger problems that I see with the platforms. I think as long as you're operating on a capitalist business model that focuses on like surveillance and harvesting data and emphasizing user engagement, it's not going to be an ethical model. So I think there's a future in the sense that they're extremely successful businesses and they're very good at keeping people online, but I don't see that as an ethical future. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Kind of?
Kind of. Do you think there's a risk in Mastodon with the different instances that you have an instance that is moderated internally but has a problematic setup outside?
Yeah, of course. So Alex just asked if there was a risk of having Mastodon instances that are moderated internally, but they have problematic like views, or that's basically what he said. Yeah, of course. There are like right-wing Mastodon instances, and so when a lot of fascists got thrown off Twitter like last year or so, they moved to this platform called Gab, which is like a fork of the Mastodon code. So it's basically Mastodon that they're using. But the response to that is that you can just block whole instances if you want to. So if the users on your instance don't want to see like fascist content, which I hope they don't, then as an admin, you can block whole instances. So you can just defederate from instances. So there are tools for handling these kind of things, yeah.
But they still can exist.
Oh yeah, of course they can exist, yeah. There's nothing stopping anyone from spinning up a Mastodon server and hosting whatever kind of community they want. Yeah. Other questions? No? Okay. Is there anything from the viewers? No? Okay. All right. Then I guess we can tie it up. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your questions.